Gonna record. Hello, wonderful peoples. How are you doing? Welcome back to Theo is Back. So for today, I have a very special guest who I'm going to introduce you to in a minute. Right now, I'm gonna wait exactly 1 minute for some people to come in, for me to do my final check if everything is recording and well. If you're watching, let me know where you're watching from. What time is it over there? And stuff. We'll start in exactly 1 minute. Okay, we are already here. Okay, this looks good. This looks good. All right, Joan, are you ready?
I am.
Yes. Okay, looks like we are on live. YouTube has give us a go ahead. All right, my wonderful peoples. So, like I said, welcome. So today I have a very special guest who I'm very curious to interview. Basically, I must admit it's kind of a selfish interview because I'm very curious towards her life and everything that she does, because she's kind of pursuing the life that I want to pursue, but she's like a few years ahead, I would say, So in today's interview, we have a young lady called Joanne. Um, Let me see. I'll give you some comments. 1 second before we start. Before we start, though, I would like to give a big shout out to Fahad Mukunzi. He is a fellow YouTuber. His channel is called Bold African. He's the one who interviewed Joanne, and that's how I actually found out about Joanne and Joanne's story. So Fahad, thank you very much for the plug and for the connect. Make sure to follow him too as well. Anyway, so in today's story, like I said, we have a CEO and co-founder of Illum Creative. This is the young lady that you're seeing right now. Let me see. I had written up some stuff about her so that I don't forget. So, Illum Creative is a communication agency. Is that right, Joanne?
It is, yes.
It is. All right. So, my first question that I have for you: what is it about your life right now that surprises you the most?
In this particular moment, in this phase of being home a
Mm-hmm.
lot, what's surprising me is how good I am at being home and how I don't mind it so much. I had a lot of social engagements before, and there
Mm-hmm.
were just things that we had to do for work. And then, of course, family weddings, going out, and it just became part of my everyday life.
Yeah.
Full weeks, evenings full. And now, without all that, I'm actually much more comfortable than I thought I would be. So that's surprising me.
All right. So would you be classified as as an introvert? You say?
Um, I think I might be an introvert with extrovert tendencies.
Okay.
I enjoy being out with people, but there's something about being in the calm of your own space that's really, really great.
Yeah. All right. So, um, Joanne here, like me, moved to Rwanda, but back in the year 2001, when it was not so popular to basically move back to Africa, um, she has literally seen Rwanda rise from the ashes to the beautiful country that it is right now. And back then, I think not many people were doing it, or at least the people who came, they kind of like, went back. But you stayed, you sticked around. And I know in the interview you said that it was because of your father. But why did your father want you to come to Rwanda?
Well, so my father was part of the long-standing history of the liberation of Rwanda,
Yeah.
from way before when he was still in Uganda and in Kenya, and having their home back, having come back, having a place to call home once again was such an
Hmm.
amazing feat, in all honesty. It was something that we were so incredibly proud of, and we owe such a debt of gratitude to everybody who was a part of it. And so my
Yeah.
father was a key part of it, and he wanted us to come home to basically learn about Rwanda and learn about our home. We weren't born here, my sisters and we didn't grow up here. So the impetus to get us to come to Rwanda was to get us to discover home, a new version of home, one that we hadn't known before. and see where he was from, what he fought for, and also be a
Mhm.
part of what it meant to build the new Rwanda. That was very important for him, and that's why he encouraged us to do so.
Okay. And so, but before you came to Rwanda, you visited a few times, right? And I believe it was back in 1995 when you first came back.
Yes, 95, we were here in 97. We came a few times. So we came right after the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi. We came right when here, and it was, I mean, I think everybody knows it was a completely different place, but
Yeah.
it's night and day. In all honesty, the growth that has happened in this country, the efforts that people have put in, is just like mind blowing. And so we did come then first to visit. We were visiting my grandparents and family members who were here. We were
Yeah.
seeing what my dad had been a part of. We were
Hmm.
learning about the country. So we had come to visit, and so coming back to live was also still an interesting thing because there were certain industries that were coming up, certain things that were building, but it wasn't really that diverse of a place as it is now, that exciting
Yeah.
of a place, that entertaining, not so much. So it was a shift in just having grown up possibly anywhere else, not necessarily just from where I had grown up from. So it was essentially a commitment to understand, and it was a commitment to, at the time, I think, of being younger, you don't necessarily know that you're building something,
Yeah.
or you're part of something so big. Instead, you're curious, you're interested, you're intrigued, you want to be part of it, but you don't necessarily know the gravity of the impact that you can have. So
Yeah.
at the time, it was a bit different from people who now I think are ready to come and start industries. They're ready to come and build businesses and grow something, and they kind of have a vision as to where it can go based on the environment that they can work in Rwanda. At the time,
Yeah.
everything was really quite new, so
Yeah.
you were starting from scratch, but didn't really know how far it could go. But it was exciting still.
It's so funny that you are describing it like that, like starting from scratch, because like when I first came back to Rwanda, it was like in 2009. I felt like
Mhm.
everything was starting from scratch, but it apparently was you like it had already been developed a bit more. But then
Yeah.
so in 2001, you decided to to make the jump, to move. How was it when you like? What was the state of Rwanda back then? And did you feel like, as a woman, that it was like safe enough for you?
The interesting thing for me is that Rwanda has always felt pretty safe to me.
Hmm.
I think also because of the community at the time that I was surrounded by. So we were in a pretty good neighborhood that was highly secure because of the people who lived there. So we were in Kimihurura at the time where a lot of ministers were living. So walking around there wasn't necessarily particularly dangerous or threatening.
Yeah.
Um, it was still a city that was on the rise. So there were still certain neighborhoods that weren't necessarily safe. But
Hmm.
in the circle that I moved in, or in the space that I was in, which was essentially home, and maybe going to visit people, going to work, it wasn't as much going out or as exploring for me at the time. I felt pretty comfortable. I felt pretty safe. I felt like I could move within my city pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt also that there were opportunities that were going to be offered to me that I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily have before. And not just because I was a woman, but because just of maybe what I had studied, what I was interested in, what I wanted to do. Um, so and I could see people also. I came at a time where other people had also just arrived or were about to, and there were some pretty inspirational people who had decided to move back to the country.
Hmm.
So I could kind of follow also in their steps a little bit and see what they had intended to do when they came here, what their motivation was to be here, how they spent their time. So I didn't feel completely comfortable because I didn't have the language. I didn't have
Yeah.
Kinyarwanda. Right now, it's still pretty whack, but it has improved slightly. And so moving around wasn't as easy
Yeah.
as it could have been in any other place that I had lived before. But it's just a matter of learning your city. It's a matter of, I mean,
Yeah.
when you arrive in a place, you don't impose your things on that place. That place exists already. So you have
Yeah.
to live within that space and work within that. So I always felt pretty comfortable being here from the beginning. And I think it's because I had a good support system.
And so you started by looking for a job with
Yes.
limited in Rwanda.
Yes.
How was the landscape of getting a job like back then? Like, say, was it like easy because you became from abroad, or was it maybe a bit tougher because you did not have the language or did not know the right people in the higher ranks?
Well, since we had started coming for vacation, my parents had basically made us get jobs. So we had to, before I moved back, even since we've been very young, my parents have always emphasized work ethic. So we had jobs since we were about 12 years old or a bit younger.
Mhm.
So it was the same thing here. We had, like, I worked at the New Times a while back when we were here on vacation. I worked there with my sister.
Yeah.
And the language barrier was very interesting then too. It was an English publication, but still within the office, you have to use a lot of French and some
Yeah.
Kinyarwanda, and that was an interesting uh, hurdles to overcome.
Yeah.
Getting the job that I got when I first arrived, I was basically just applying for jobs as anyone would through the advertisements in the newspaper or
Yeah.
through recommendations that people give you. So and so told me there's an opening at this place. Put together your CV and email it. You had to go to internet cafe back then and email it to whoever would be interested.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was basically for me. It always helps in a smaller country like this and in a smaller city. It does always help when you know somebody who knows somebody because they can get you the opportunity to apply. So that was what it would be, is essentially looking for work, the same as anyone else, and then the word of mouth, the connections are the ones that you have because someone can tell you there's an opening here or there.
Yeah.
And so I applied for that first job. And so I was doing that job um, with others who not necessarily who had come from abroad. There were a couple of people who were raised in Rwanda and Kigali, and others who had grown up in Uganda or Kenya. So it wasn't necessarily because, and then there were also others from abroad. So it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily because people had come from different places. It just essentially how you fit into the company, because we were all kind of junior level, and it was a lot of research entailed. So it's what work you could bring, how you fit into the company, and that was the priority, really.
All right. So,
Hmm.
like fast forwarding, like a big giant step, 10 years later,
Yeah.
you decided to co-found your own business, Illum Creative, and from what I'm gathering, it was something that still resonates actually today, 2021, of wanting to tell the African stories,
Hmm.
by African. So what struck me the most is that you were already dealing with that 2010, basically 2011, and until this day, it is still kind of like relevant. Why is it that you think that the surge or the need to tell the African stories by Africans is so big that you even started like your own business to do that?
It's big because there are stories, they are our stories to tell, and they haven't
Yeah.
all been told. And there's so much opportunity. Um, we either have no real narrative or no presence when it comes to storytelling, or one that is kind of manufactured by
Yeah.
others. And so there's always an other in our storytelling. And so it makes it difficult for everyone to get a chance to tell their own unique story. Um, if you look at Kigali, if you look at Nairobi, if you look at Dakar, when you think about those cities, there are people who have completely different backgrounds all living in the same place. They all may have been born the same year, even in the same neighborhood, but their
Yeah.
lives, their interests, everything is completely different. I think globally we get to see stories of people who are um, artists, who are poor and struggling, who are rich and thriving, people who have a day-to-day struggle, people who have day-to-day joys. Um, but we don't necessarily get to hear that coming out of the continent.
Yeah.
When we do, we celebrate it a lot because it's very rare that we get to see it. But for the past few years, Africans themselves have been eager to tell their own story. And I mean, it's reflected so much here in Rwanda because we have so many things that are said about us as a country, but
Yeah.
we are the ones who want to say how we're really living and how we're really experiencing the country, what we enjoy, what we don't like, how we express ourselves. And there are many stories that I can't tell about people who are even possibly my neighbors. So in Ilum, what we're trying to do is not only be the ones who are telling the stories through visual means, through creative content, but we also want to be kind of a conduit or a vessel for others to be able to tell their own stories. So we have been, for the past 10 years, we've been doing our agency work, which is essentially using our tools, which is through photography, graphic design, and video, to tell the stories of companies or individuals, projects. And now, for the next 10 years, we want to be able to create the space where we're supporting others to do the same through their
Mm-hmm.
own platforms, through ours. We want to connect people using our own personal resources to others who can facilitate. And so we want to create this space for African storytelling, Pan-African storytelling, whether it's through us or not,
Yeah.
because it's really just key for for us to experience life as others do. For
Yeah.
example, you created this platform for yourself. You're telling the story of you coming back, of what you want to achieve. And through that, you're inspiring many others to do something similar or understand that they can also create a space for themselves, um, and make it and have a global reach. So
Yeah.
that's why it's key, because if I didn't stumble upon your page, I wouldn't know all the things that you have been doing and experiencing here, and you experience it from a different lens than I do, and that just makes life more interesting.
That is true. So what is very unique about Illum Creative, at least from my personal opinion, is that I tried to start a company and I soon realized it's really hard to get good employees or partners basically to work with you who are on basically on your level of like thinking or visionary and whatever. But you guys, you started Illum with like 5 people, 5, you know.
Which
so I
everyone thought was crazy. So
yeah,
it's
like
not.
how did you guys, like connect? And was like 5 just better than one kind of like thinking, or was it just like coincidence that you guys met?
No, no, it was a coincidence that we met, but we met slightly in two different groups. So one of my co-founders and business partners, my sister. So
Yeah,
obviously we met as day ones, and then we also had a friend of ours who has a strong background in marketing.
yeah,
Um, and that was just a coincidence. She just happened to be our friend.
yeah,
And I was working at RDB, and I was in charge of a Pan African dance festival. And I needed to get a great photographer. And I was told about somebody who was a Rwandan but lived in Belgium.
yeah.
And I didn't know how I was going to get him to come all the way to Rwanda for that, but it was just a matter of trying. So I connected with him. He agreed to come for the festival. And in those conversations, around when we were doing the festival, I pulled in some of my friends to work on it with us. And there were some of my colleagues already at RDB who were working on it as well. And we just ended up having great conversations about Rwanda, about the representation of Rwanda in across other countries, across the continent, across the world, how the country itself was doing a great job of PR and about talking about itself as a nation that was rising. But the businesses within the country, all the creative people, because we were working with people in the creative fields. We were working
Yeah,
with dancers, producers, visual artists, performers, and people just didn't know that Rwanda had those people here. So we just talked about the lack of, of storytelling around the creative industries, around business, around innovation. And in having those conversations, we started to think maybe this is something that we can do on our own. And
but how did
so,
you like practically get them to come here? Did you offer them shares? Did you like offer them good
oh
salary
no, there was no
benefits?
company at the time. There was no company at the time.
Okay,
That was just us doing a whole separate project and then having
okay,
conversations. So
yeah,
we were just talking about possibilities. And
mhm,
so in those conversations about possibilities, we were looking at the work that we were doing, and we said, is
yeah,
there some? and we got excited about telling the stories of Rwanda itself. We got
Yeah.
excited about our capabilities of visual capabilities, of digital capabilities, because we were also starting on the digital platforms, and we have been doing it kind of. Each individual had been doing their own thing. There was someone who had a strong marketing background, strong photography background, strong content creation background, and
Mhm.
we thought, what if we brought all those elements together
Yeah.
to actually, and we initially just wanted to tell our own stories. We initially just wanted to create content that we would
Yeah.
put out there that would be interesting to people. And at the time, there was no real phrase as someone as a content creator. There wasn't really as much of that around, like you wouldn't necessarily hear it as much.
Hmm.
So we were trying to say, what kind of a company are we? We want to use visuals. We want to use marketing tools. We want to use um, our own unique ideas to create stories about the city. Like, for example, there was a great initiative that was started that's still going on, Spoken Word Rwanda, and they
Yeah.
had some incredibly talented people, and it gave people a platform that they never had before to just come and speak their minds, use their poetry. We took some photos there. My partner Gail took some photos there. We had those photos on social media. They used them, and people were just so excited to see, especially I think members of the diaspora. They hadn't
Yeah.
necessarily had a chance to see that kind of thing taking place in Kigali. So it was
Yeah.
funky, it was cool, it was interesting, it was engaging, and we said we can do more of this. When we
Yeah.
first started, it didn't come out as this nice package of Ilum Creative Studio. It was a bunch of different ideas that needed to be kind of actually roped in.
Yeah.
And so we also, we got together as individuals who had different strengths. We got together as individuals who wanted to bring all of our strengths into one space and see how we could use those to work with others. So it wasn't necessarily just because we clicked and we all had the same idea. It was an organic conversation that led to a what if. And then even then we thought we were in marketing company. Are we advertising? What are we exactly are we doing? And
Yeah.
we were the first communications agency, or among the first communications agencies in the country before it was marketing and advertising. And
Hmm.
so when we started off, we had to kind of also educate everybody about what it is that we do and what we could do for them. So
Yeah.
the 5 partners, people thought that was a bit insane at first, but if you bring, it's important when you're in business also to look at people who have strengths that you don't have to help
Hmm.
you achieve what you want to achieve. And so we were a team of people who had individual strengths that the company needed. And that's how we actually came together.
Yeah. So in that coming together, you started building your company. What were the first challenges that you personally like encountered when you like started becoming a true entrepreneur and growing your business?
Well, the first ones were how to run a business.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds really good, but the details of actually running a business and running it well. Um, so, so I think a lot of, I think right now there are a lot of online courses paid for and free where you can just get into the basics of starting a business, how to do a business plan,
Yeah.
what you need to look out for, employing people, your HR, making sure you're tax compliant, all that stuff is there. It's so key for people to look for as much as possible to make sure they
Yeah.
understand. But in the beginning, when you're taking a creative idea and you try to turn that creative idea into a business, it's very difficult, or it's just a challenge. You have to learn. So it's a matter of learning from experts. It's a matter of teaching yourself a little bit. It's a matter of experience. So turning an idea, a creative idea, into a business was the biggest challenge. And then even working together from friends into colleagues and making sure that everything maintained in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
That's also pretty key.
And did you get a feeling like because you grew outside of the country, so you had a different education, I believe, from Canada and South Africa.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that education like propelled you in the Rwandan economy? Do you feel like it was an added plus, or you feel like it was the same as if you had studied here?
Um, for me personally, I felt like it was a plus just because I had experienced, um, it's because of some of the experience that I'd had before that didn't seem to exist here at the time.
Yeah.
That is in terms of how I had seen myself before in a professional capacity, and also what I had been, I don't like the expression exposed to, but essentially what you've been
Mhm.
exposed to in terms of how businesses run and operate, and how to essentially translate your ideas into something that's a bit more practical, from theory to practical.
Yeah.
But I think that advantage lasted a short time, because the country built up and grew so fast, and also individuals are incredibly resourceful and resilient. So
Hmm.
my education or my experience from outside could only help me so much, and then the environment I'm in is one that I have to learn and adapt to.
Yeah.
So I think when you're a member of the diaspora and you're considering returning back, it's really good to look at what you already know, but also look at the environment that you're coming into, because it teaches you a lot more. You may have to throw some of your ideas out the window because you're just in a new place and it operates
Yeah.
slightly differently. So I think there were some advantages, definitely, but the most important thing was to also remember or recognize how to adjust my notions, everything I had before, to match what I was going into now.
Okay. One question that I'm kind of like personally curious about, and I also kind of hear it a lot from people who I talk to or who follow me online, is Rwanda is seen as a very female-friendly country, through its representation in parliament, and also help, like single mothers or women empowerment. You being a woman who has been living and working here for the past 20 years, what was your experience in that?
Um, it's more so recently than before, when the actual national campaigns began about gender equality and gender balance. Then you would
Yeah.
hear more about equality. It was bought into pretty quickly compared to other countries. Previously, I mean, I would go into meetings with my male colleague, and
Mm.
I would answer a question, and they would ask a question to him. Then I might respond, and they would still look at him. And so it was just those like small, those the microaggressions that were slightly continuous. I was deemed as pretty young and as a woman, so it wasn't necessarily, people didn't necessarily think that I would be among the and this was happening in my previous job, even before I started the company, among
Yeah.
those who would be able to have conversations with them and take a leadership role.
Yeah.
I think that was traditionalist. I think that was just how people always had behaved, or had understood how, what a person in my capacity, my employment capacity, or as a founder of a company should look like, or should be like. So I didn't necessarily fit the mold at the time. Many of the young women, especially young women who were here, didn't necessarily. And the country was attracting a lot of young people more so recently. And
Yeah.
when you have younger people take on like higher, those that are perceived to be higher positions, it makes people have to adjust their thinking and their understanding. So at the time, for sure, there were small things here and there, but I always felt like, especially the jobs that I worked in, what they were most concerned about is the work that you did and how you performed, and not
Yeah.
necessarily yeah. But I just found that a lot of women in Rwanda were just so enthusiastic to do a great job. They
Yeah.
were encouraging, they were inspiring, and a lot of women in business here do a variety. They have a variety of businesses. It's not necessarily just women-focused businesses, and it's just because they have such a strong attitude about getting the job done and doing it well and succeeding. And so to receive that kind of support from your government, from the institutions that are around you, is not something to be taken lightly. I think it's something that we just say, yes, it's awesome, it's dope. But if you think about other places that just don't, or when you
Hmm.
recognize that you are supported in your environment, it's a huge, it makes a huge difference. Um, so I see a lot of younger women now in business, and who are starting also just organizations and collectives that are so inspiring and really engaging, and they have no fear about saying who they are and what they want to achieve. And I think that that's actually amazing. And I think it's important for us to continue to encourage women in that way, because just traditionally, the women are the ones who have been overlooked. When it comes to the men in our society and the young men, I don't think anybody should feel slighted in any way or feel like they're not going to get a chance because a woman is there,
Yeah.
ironically, because that's
Yeah.
how it's been working the other way for years. I think everybody, just if we just keep supporting the work of each other, then I think it's just going to get us further. That's just how it works. And I think that's what the president recognized at the time when he was
Yeah.
like, "You can't build up the country with only half the people," and that's really just how we need to consistently think.
Yeah, yeah. A massive for me. What it has made me realize, indeed, is that like gender balance, gender equality, it is something that is need to be put on the agenda, because sometimes you even see like a panel on TV, and then let's say there are like four people and there's like one lady, and they will mention it. They'll be like, "Hey guys, why is it there's only one lady here?"
Yeah.
Which is, to me, it's very unique. I think only in Rwanda you would hear something like that,
Mhm.
whereas in other countries they just kind of assume that's like the status quo. So, but of course, I know you cannot really compare with other countries, but you would agree that Rwanda is a very female-friendly country.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I want to talk about one thing that is also, like I said, it's a selfish interview, but I've been always wanting to ask you about dinner en blanc.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the, for the people who don't know, dinner, can you explain a bit what dinner en blanc is?
Yes. So Dîner Blanc is a concept that began in Paris. Ooh, now I guess over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a man who was living in Paris. He had returned to Paris from having traveled elsewhere and wanted to get his friends together. He didn't have a big enough compound, so he just said, "Let's go meet somewhere in the center of Paris, but everybody wear all white so we could
Yeah.
recognize each other and know we're coming to the same place," because some of them didn't know each other. He said, "Pack a picnic, let's all meet in the center of town." So they wore all white, they packed their things, brought some chairs, and they sat together and they recognized each other because of the all white. Got together, sat, had a meal, left.
Hmm.
And they had so much fun, he decided to continue it as just an annual thing for him and his friends. And then his son decided to make it into an event and started it off in Montreal
Yeah.
and then to New York, and it started growing more and more. So essentially, it is an outdoor picnic, but it's an elegant outdoor picnic where you bring your own food and drinks and
Hmm.
wines, and you sit with your friends and you enjoy an evening out under the stars. There's usually some live music. And so
Yeah.
we were the first ones on the continent to do it. We bid to do a Dîner en Blanc here because, for a couple of reasons. I used to work in the tourism industry, in the tourism space, and there had been a lot of activities that were centered around the national parks and things outside of the city of Kigali. So we didn't
Yeah.
really have a Kigali event that was known as like an annual tourism event, and people didn't necessarily get excited about coming to the city. It was like a stopping point before going somewhere else. So I always had in my mind something creating an event that would bring people to the city. And Dîner en Blanc itself, you do it in different parts of the city each year, so you could kind of show off your city.
Yeah.
So when they first heard about us, they Googled Kigali.
Yeah.
And of course, the only things they saw were images of the genocide and of gorillas.
Yeah.
And our big vision for Ilum was to change what you see when you Google Rwanda for that reason in particular, because it was so much more than that. So they didn't understand how we could host the event here. But we got them to trust us with that notion. And so we brought it to Kigali. And so the first year it was just kind of talked about a lot. People didn't understand what it would look like. And then when they saw it, it was just a lot more um, exciting than people thought it might be, or they finally understood the concept. So we've
Yeah.
hosted it for several years now. We started skipping a couple of years in between just to get a bit more momentum for it and to get more support in terms of sponsorship support, because every year is a bit difficult in Kigali.
Yeah.
And so people have started to come in from the region, from Burundi, from Nigeria, from Uganda, from Kenya, to come to our event here. It
Hmm.
makes it more exciting, it makes it more interesting. You don't know who you're sitting next to. You don't necessarily know
Indeed.
what you're going to have when you're there. You don't know where you're going. So people who like a little bit of adventure in their in their social activities enjoyed that concept, and then they would get to make friends. But there are a lot
Yeah.
of people who are very anxious about, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what
Oh,
I'm doing.
really?
Uh, yeah, it made people very anxious. Some people didn't come the
Oh
first
my
year
God.
because they were like, I first have to see what it is.
Yeah,
Um, but
that's
we
true. That's
really give,
true.
yeah, we really give a lot of credit and love to those who have been supporting us from the first year, and they just
Yeah.
showed up and they said, I'm ready for whatever this adventure is. So
Yeah.
we've always tried to make it a little, we had to change the rules a little bit for us, with their permission, of course, to make it more African friendly. In
Yeah.
other cities, it's a lot more to do with couples, and
Yeah.
dining as two. And we know we like to dine as a group, even if it's a group of couples. Everybody likes to be there as a group. You roll in as a group, you hang
Yeah.
out, and you leave. So we made it more like that. So we changed a few things more comfortable for us. But it's been a fun event. It got added to the RDB tourism calendar, annual tourism calendar, and it's just been something that we look forward to hosting again soon when we're able to. But it's also one of those things that's also shifted the mind of what Kigali has to offer, what Rwanda has to offer,
Yeah.
and another thing that got the attention of the diaspora as well.
No, like uh, personally, I experienced it the first time in 2016. I was here doing an internship, and then I heard about it. I was like, "Oh, I will be in Kigali," and then it just happened to be like it was. Of course, maybe of course you thought about it. It was like good timing. It was around summer, so I had some friends
Yeah,
also
yeah,
coming to Kigali, and I must say it was like. But that time I was doing my internship and I'd made up my mind that I wanted to come to Rwanda, and I was like, okay, after my internship, I'll see what I can do. But then after I experienced the Dîner en Blanc, I was like, no, I definitely need to be in Kigali because the vibe,
awesome.
the vibe was like it was like really on point. It was like the first time to see like all of the Kigali people all dressed up like nice and the
Yeah,
music
you get
on.
dressed up. It's fun. Yeah,
Outdoor. I come from Europe, so it's like, the weather is not always guaranteed. And here it was the first time I felt like somebody's utilizing the weatherness of Kigali and the light.
yeah,
So and also in my channel here, I like to give up like sometimes I give like some business ideas or what people want to do. And one of the things that I realized that it's an opportunity here is something called like an East African Coachella. Ghana did an African Coachella, and Dine
yeah.
is right up that alley where I feel like if it is there every year, people will put it in their calendar, and they will basically come. They will come just for this
100%. Yeah,
one dinner. And yeah, of course, now with COVID, it's a bit more like difficult. But I wanted to ask you indeed, like, why you guys like skipped a few years in between, but now you told me it was to gain
yeah, yeah.
something.
We got to
But
gain a bit of momentum.
what have you learned from organizing such like international event over the many years actually so far?
Well, actually, what we learned is, well, what I learned from it, I think, is the importance of a platform in the many ways that exists. So,
Yeah,
when we host an event like that, obviously we use all local talent and support. So one of our
yeah,
biggest supporters is Positive Productions. They do all of our lighting and our staging and everything. We use local decorators. We use local, especially musicians and talent. We really try to get as many people who are not necessarily heard of already, some new artists, and use that as a stage for them to get known by a lot of people. We try to
yeah,
use as many new venues as we can, so people can also know what businesses are happening. So we use local vendors and providers, restaurants. Our whole goal was to get as many local providers as possible so that they could also increase their business. When you organize an event like this, you see how far the reach is, how far your money can go, how far support can go, and how we can boost a lot of talent. I remember when Motions first started, they dressed some people for Dîner en Blanc. I think it was 2015 or 14, and you saw all these men coming with similar kind of styles but different, and so everyone would recognize that's a new
yeah.
designer. Same thing with Sonia
Okay.
Mugabo. We had musicians. We had Mike Kahura open for us he was there for the first Dîner en Blanc, and I think for the third one. And we have different artists who are there and different suppliers. For me, I saw organizing as an event like this as an opportunity to build on other people's businesses and build on the talent that we already have here. That's one main thing, is to make sure everybody gets as much shine as possible so that we can all win in this one event. A second thing is about the making sure that an event at this global level still represents who you are as a country, as a people, as a city. We tried as much as possible to add our own elements to it. And so we tried to change that a little bit with the food, with the music, with the way we even just engage with the people, so that people can feel comfortable. Even if it's a global event, you feel like you can see yourself in it. When you're hosting a thing for people, an event for people like this, the third thing is to really put yourself in their position. We ask a lot of our guests of Dîner en Blanc. We ask them to find their outfits and look fly, make sure the tables look dope, the food is good. They have to get on a bus at a certain time. Sometimes there are delays, sometimes there's rain. They have to wait and go where they don't know where they're going. And then they show up, they have to do their own tables. So we ask a lot of them. So we tried to create an experience that's going to make them just forget all the work they did and just remember all the good times that they had. And just love. Yeah, and it's creative. It gets people to be super creative and super inventive. And then you just think about the vibes and the people that you meet and the people you're with and how good everybody looks, how good everybody's feeling. So you have to put yourself in the person's shoes from the time they register to the event to the time they get on the last bus to leave. And that's what we try to do with Dîner en Blanc all the time.
So a bit in closing, a bit. So you've been now on the continent for 20 plus years now, working. How has your life or your life view changed, basically, like in your personal life? Like, how is it to live basically in Africa for such an extended time? And now I believe you are a mother too, so you're raising children. So how is your life now on the continent after this 20 years of living here?
Well, it's interesting before, when people would, they ask you where you're from, and I think a lot of people who watch you can know that the answer to this is a very long one for some of us. I was born here, I lived here, I grew up here, I live, and so it makes it for a very long conversation. And so this is the place that I've now lived the longest. This is now the place that I call home. And you're right, I have my family here. I'm married and I have my children. I'm raising my children here. My business is here, and it's in a place where I believe it can just grow and get even better. My people are here, and my people who aren't here, they're not so far away anymore because of technology. But it's interesting to come to a place, to live in a place like Rwanda that's growing as fast as you want to grow as an individual. That is as relatively open as you need it to be able to live and thrive and have your family and be comfortable. So it's just wonderful to be in a place where you can feel safe, where you can feel there's opportunity, where you can feel like there is a place for you, and is a place for you to be able to go home. I find it really fascinating also that people who are not from Rwanda are moving here and feeling like they're at home. That's pretty fascinating to me too, because it seems to be happening with a lot of people. So you'd mentioned something about personal life, about growing your personal life here. Sometimes the place can feel a bit small, I won't lie. It's not, you bump into kind of the same people over and over again. But it's wonderful when you find your people, when you find your space. And I think it's a great place to raise a family. I think it's a great place to live. And I think it's just the opportunities is kind of what you make it. And as where your life is what you make it. And so if this is the place that brings you joy and brings you comfort and brings you stability, this is the place for you.
And can you briefly talk about, because I do get this question a lot from my people who follow me, raising your children in Africa, how does that differ from raising them, like abroad, or in a Western country where they're the minority basically?
Oh yeah, that's interesting to me. And my kids are quite young. They're only 3 and 2, so I kind of have yet to see the impact because I was raised in a place where I was a minority for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
And raising them in a place where they can just automatically call it home and be comfortable
Yeah,
is actually still fascinating to me. I'm I'm watching it happen because they don't have to worry about all of the other things that we had to worry about growing up. So
exactly.
I think it's a brilliant thing. I think it's a brilliant thing to take that burden off of them. But I never want them to live in a world where they've only seen one place. I want them to be able to experience as much of the world as possible, more than I did. I traveled a lot for my job as well in tourism, so I managed to go to many different countries, and I want them to understand what it's like to be a person existing in those different countries. But the fact that they
Mhm.
always have a place that they can call home, where the people from home are like them, I think that's beautiful. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna go through some quick questions that I got from you. Some of them who sent me in advance, and some of them who are like replying on our wall right now. The first one was from Deborah, one of my Patreon. She was asking, what are some of the biggest mistakes Black Americans make when visiting or living in Rwanda?
What are some of the mistakes they make?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm not sure. I really um, know of any mistakes that they have made. I think the mistake that anyone can make, anybody, when they go to live in any other country,
yeah,
is to, as I mentioned before, kind of just bring your uh, preconceived notions or your ideas about a place and stick to them. I think you
yeah,
just have to be open to what a country or place brings you. And I don't think for those I've met, I don't think I know of any big mistakes that they have made. But I think that it's just key to understand that when you're moving to any new place, you kind of allow that place to let you know what it's about, what the experiences are like, what it's like on a day-to-day basis, and then find your way within that.
yeah. All right. Next question was from Leslie. What type of direction or advice would you provide to an African diaspora woman as it relates to establishing a for-profit business in Rwanda or East Africa in general?
I think when it comes to establishing any business, first you have to obviously look at the business that you want to bring and what gap is it filling,
Yeah,
who are you serving, and what are you trying to get them to. It's for profit, so buy from you or purchase from you, or what kind of services are you offering to them. So if you're looking at a different country where you haven't been, in Rwanda or in East Africa, or where you've been a few times, you're just looking at the current business environment, who your potential competitors might be, what exactly it is that you have to offer to them, and see if there's a market for that. By seeing if there's a market, essentially, some people do some small market research. They just ask a few people who they know who live there. If I were to bring this product or this service, do you think you'd be interested? What would make you interested in it? What do you have so far that's like this? What would you change about it? And try to see if your business would actually be needed here, or if there's a potential for it to be a profitable business.
hmm,
You look at maybe what the environment is like for whether your business will succeed. For example, if you're trying to manufacture something here, do we have the facilities to do that? What would it cost for you to bring something in? What is the tax situation like? What kind of business environment has there been for others? And so there are a few Kigali business groups, I think, on Facebook and on other networks, where you can ask several questions about what it's like to do business here, and if I were to bring this kind of thing, do you think it would work? And people are incredibly helpful and open when it comes to our business community. So I think you could try that.
all right. That is true indeed about the community part.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Question here from Jack, who's watching with us. Are you concerned about the level of population growth to the country resources? Is it existing? What is happening in Rwanda? But there will need to be a healthy balance. Who is studying that?
Yes, I think even before when I was working in the tourism industry, there were obviously concerns raised about the population growth and about how it might, for example, affect our resources and affect our protected areas, and then generally for the health and well-being of the population. Now, I do not have enough expertise to answer the question on how it affects business health, how it affects our economy. I don't have the right answers.
Yeah.
Who is studying that? I'm not quite sure which ministry it is, but I know definitely for sure there have been studies that are ongoing about resources in our capacity. And I know, for example, the city of Kigali is expanding a little bit, and what that means for rural areas is also key. But I don't have the knowledge myself to answer the question, but I'm sure the information is there.
All right. Just a couple more questions from some people who are watching here. So it says here from Delete. I live in New York City. My fiance is Rwandan. I'm planning to invest in a good companies in Rwanda between $100,000 and to 2 million to 1 million. I know this topic can be subjective, but what's your yearly profit? And as she been in business for 10 years in Rwanda, I just want to get perspective on how much Rwandan business make.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is a slightly deeper conversation because it also depends on which business that you want to invest in based on what they make. I would love to have a separate conversation on it because I think it's a little bit more detailed.
Yeah.
But sure, maybe we can exchange information and then we
Yeah.
can have a conversation about that. There's also a
Okay.
group of businesses that's a kind of a WhatsApp group that might have people who have a variety of businesses and who can maybe provide their portfolios as well. So we can see if we can connect like that and see where they might want to
Yeah.
invest their money. Mm-hmm.
All right. Have you considered that green energy can eliminate the stress of population growth? It's a random question, but maybe you have the answer to that.
Yes, that's something that my husband is very enthusiastic about. So we do have conversations about that quite a bit. Have I considered it? Yes. Is it something that is being worked on? I think on a national scale, definitely. But I think even as individuals, we find a lot more people are looking for more sustainable ways to run their homes. For example, using a lot more solar power than regular energy resources. And it's something that we have conversations about on a pretty regular basis. One of my business partners as well is very passionate about it. So
Yeah.
I am yes, I've definitely considered it. And I think there are a lot of exciting projects coming along those lines.
Yeah. So my final question to you is so 10 years ago you started with this project of changing the image of Rwanda.
Yes.
Basically, when you Google Rwanda, what kind of like image you've seen? Do you feel
Yes.
that you have achieved that? Do you feel like you have made your impact?
Definitely. I definitely feel like we've made our impact and I feel like it's ongoing. And we've even broadened it. Every once in a while, every few years, I would Google Rwanda and I would go to the images and I would go to the stories, and a few of those would be ours. I could physically see our contribution that we made directly to transforming the visibility of the country. We also have another company of ours called Illum Editions that when we published our book called This is Rwanda, which is aerial photography of the country. And it's all from the angle of a helicopter. And it's just an amazing view of the country, a different perspective of the country. But also in our daily work, in the work that we've done to transform the visibility of some businesses that operate here, that are Rwandan-based businesses, of individual artists, of projects and programs that are benefiting the communities in Rwanda and also across the African continent. I think we have definitely made our impact over the past 10 years. We've contributed to the storytelling that people have around their work. And in the next 10 years, I definitely see us being on a more Pan-African level, and that's what we're working towards. So I just see it getting bigger and better.
Yeah. So for the people like me, actually even more specific, like let's say there's a young girl right now who is in, I don't know, Canada, Belgium, or Australia, who wants to basically make the jump like you, want to come to Rwanda, live the African life, start a business, or maybe work for a company. what advice would you give her or him for some based on your experience?
So when you make a big shift in your life, when you make a change in your life, obviously it's going to be a bit nerve-wracking. You have fears here and there, but you have almost equal fear, equal excitement for this new adventure. I would say to those who are genuinely considering moving back to the continent or moving back to Rwanda in particular,
Yeah,
is to allow the experience to unfold. You will have great days and you'll have very annoying days, and you'll have days where you feel like you want to go back or you maybe made a bad decision, and other days when you're like, this is the best decision I've ever made. And I think you just have to allow the experience to unfold for itself. I cannot tell you that for sure it's going to be exactly the way it has been for me. That's just not possible.
yeah,
But it's possible to understand that if you have this drive, if you have this push that's bringing you back to the continent, then it's the continent is essentially waiting for you.
yeah,
We have the opportunity to build what is ours. We have the opportunity to essentially grow our communities, grow our industries, and you can be a very big part of that.
yeah,
So allow the experience itself to show you what it is. Don't necessarily feel like if I come, this is exactly how it's going to be, good or bad. If it's something that's driving you, then you should do it.
yeah. Awesome, John. Thank you very much. So for the
Thank
people who are
you.
watching, please you can find all the links of from Joan in the description below, and also about her company. She is truly inspiring because she's been here for a while. It's just one of those people who just comes and does the work, and then all of a sudden you see the work speaking for itself. I can definitely attest to that. I realized it when I went to like dinner on Blanc. I realized, no, people who organize this, they were like, they had the right mindset. They put things together. Details
I'm
were,
so glad you were there. I just remember your video from there, actually.
yeah, exactly. It was like one of my, just when I started YouTubing, and I just recorded whatever I was seeing, and I just came, and I barely knew how to edit. So I just put everything that I saw together. But it was really such a fun experience, and it's awesome to have people like you who basically are representing Rwanda, representing the continent, putting in the hard work. So thank you very much for all the lovely work and the contribution that you have done. And for the people watching, you can again follow her and her journey in the links below. Joan, thank you very much for coming. And I
Thank you so
guess
much. I
we'll
appreciate it.
keep in
Thank
touch,
you.
and then we'll talk to you later.
All right. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.